Chronicles of Narnia, The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 15 The Disappearance of Jill. The patch of light did not show up anything down in the darkness where they were standing. The others could only hear, not see, Jill's efforts to get on the Marshwiggle's back. That is, they heard him saying, "You needn't put your finger in my eye," and "nor your foot in my mouth either," and "that's more like it," and "now hold on to your legs. That'll leave your arms free to steady yourself against the earth." And when they looked up, and soon they saw the black shape of Jill's head against the patch of light. "Well?" they all shouted up anxiously. "It's a hole!" cried Jill's voice. "I could get through it if I was a little bit higher." "What do you see through it?" asked Eustace. "Nothing much yet," said Jill. "I say, Puddlegum, let go my legs so I can stand on your shoulders instead of sitting on them. I can steady myself all right against the edge." They could hear her moving, and then much more of her came into sight against the greyness of opening. In fact, all of her down to the waist. "I say," began Jill, but suddenly broke off with a cry, not a sharp cry. It sounded more as if her mouth had been muffled up or something pushed into it. After that sound of her voice seemed to be shouting out as loud as she could, but they couldn't hear the words. Two things had happened at that same moment. The patch of light was completely blocked up for a second or so, and then they heard both scruffling, struggling sound in the voice of the Marshwiggle gasping, "Quick! Help! Hold on to her legs! Someone's pulling her! There! No, here!" Too late. The opening and the cold light which filled it were now perfectly clear again. Jill had vanished. "Jill! Jill!" they shouted frantically, but there was no answer. "Where the dickens could you have held her feet?" said Eustace. "I don't know, Scrub," groaned Puddlegum. "Born to be a misfit, I shouldn't wonder. Fated to be Paul's death, just as I was fated to eat the talking stag at Half Fang. Not that it wasn't my own fault as well, of course." "This is the greatest shame and sorrow that could have fallen on us," said the prince. "We have sent a brave lady into the hands of enemies and stayed behind her in safety." "Don't paint it too black, sir," said Puddlegum. "We're not very safe except for death by starvation in this hole." "I wonder, am I small enough to get through through where Jill did?" said Eustace. What had really happened to Jill was this. As soon as she got her head out of the hole, she found she was looking down as if from an upstairs window, not as if up to a trapdoor. She had been so long in the dark that her eyes couldn't have mistaken what they were seeing, except that she was not looking at the day-lit sunny world which she was so wanted to see. They had been deadly cold, and it was light blue, pale and blue. There was also a good deal of noise going on and a lot of white objects flying about in the air. It was that moment that she had shouted down to Puddlegum to let her stand up onto his shoulders. When she had done this, she could see and hear a good deal better. The noise she had been hearing turned out to be two kinds. The rhythmical thump of several feet, the music of 4 diddles, 3 flutes and a drum. She also got her position clear. She was looking out of a hole in a steep bank which sloped down and reached a level about 14 feet below her. Everything was very white. A lot of people were moving about. Then she gasped. She saw the people were trim little fauns and dryads with leaf people crowned with hair floating around them. For a second they looked as if they were moving anyhow. Then she saw that they were really doing a dance with so many complicated steps and figures that it took you some time to understand it. Then it came over her like a thunderclap that pale blue light was really moonlight, and the white stuff on the ground was really snow. And of course there were the stars staring at a black frosty sky overhead, and the tall black things behind the dancers were trees. They had not only got out to the upper world at last, but had come out in the heart of Narnia. Jill felt she could have fainted with delight, and the music, the wild music, intensely sweet and yet just a bit eerie too, and full of good magic, as the witch's thrumming had been full of bad magic, made her feel it all the more. All this takes a long time to tell, but of course it took a very short time to see. Jill turned almost at once to shout down the others, "I say, it's all right. We're out and we're home." But the reason she never got further than "I say" was this. Circling round and round the dancers was a ring of dwarfs, all dressed in their finest clothes, mostly scarlet with fur-lined hoods and golden tassels and big furry top boots. As they circled around, they were all diligently throwing snowballs. Those were the white things that Jill had seen flying through the air. They weren't throwing them at the dancers, as silly boys might have been doing in England. They were throwing them through the dance at such perfect timing and music, with such perfect aim, that all the dancers were exactly in the right places at exactly the right moments, so no one would be hit. This is called the Great Snow Dance, and it is done every year in Narnia on the first moonlit night when there's snow on the ground. Of course, it's a kind of game as well as dance, because every now and then some dancer will be at least a little bit wrong and get a snowball in the face, and everyone laughs. But a good team of dancers, dwarfs, and musicians will keep it on for hours without a single hit. On fine nights, when the cold drum taps and the hooting of the owls and the moonlight have got into their wild woodland blood, it made it even wilder, and they will dance till daybreak. I wish you could see it for yourselves. Jill had stooped down, and she got as far as to say of "I say," was of course a simply fine big snowball that came sailing through the dance from a dwarf on the far side, and got her fair and square in the mouth. She didn't at the least mind. 20 snowballs would not have damped her spirits at that moment, but however happy you are feeling, you can't talk with your mouth full of snow. And then, after considerable spluttering, she could speak again. She quite forgot her excitement that the others, down in the dark behind her, still didn't know the good news. She simply leaned out as far as the hole as she could and yelled to the dancers, "Help! Help! We're buried in the hill! Come and dig us out!" The Narnians, who had not been even noticed that little hole in the hillside, were of course very surprised, and looked about in several wrong directions before they found out where the voice was coming from. But then they caught sight of Jill, and they all came running towards her, and as many as they could scrambled up in the dark. A dozen or more hands were stretched to help her, and Jill caught hold of them and thus got out of the hole and came slithering down bank head first, then picked up herself and said, "Oh, do go dig the others out. There are 3 others besides the horses, and one of them is Prince Rilian." She was already in the middle of a crowd when she said this, for besides the dancers, all sorts of people who had been watching the dance and whom she had not seen at first came running up. Squirrels came out of the trees in showers, and so did owls. Hedgehogs came waddling as fast as their short legs would carry them. Bears and badgers followed at a slower pace. A great panther, twitching its tail in excitement, was the last to join the party. But as soon as they understood what Jill was saying, they all became active. "Pick and shovel, boys, pick and shovel!" "Off for our tool," said the dwarfs, and dashed away into the woods at top speed. "Make up some moles. They're chaps for digging. They're quite as good as dwarfs," said a voice. That was what was that she said about Prince Rilian? Said another. "Hush!" said the panther. "The poor child's crazed, and no wonder after being lost inside that hill. She doesn't know what she's saying." "That's right," said an old bear. "Why, she has Prince Rilian was a horse." "No, she didn't," said a squirrel, very pert. "Yes, she did," said an old squirrel, even prettier. "It's quite a little rude. Don't be so silly," said Jill. She spoke like that because her teeth were now chattering with the cold. Immediately one of the dryads flung around her furry cloak which some dwarf had dropped, and then he rushed to fetch his mining tools, and an obliging fawn trotted off among the trees to a place where Jill could see firelight in the mouth of a cave to get her a hot drink. But before it came, the dwarfs appeared with spades and pickaxes and charged at the hillside. Then Jill heard cries of, "Hi, what are you doing? Put that sword down!" "And now, young un, none of that. He's a vicious one now, isn't he?" Jill hurried to the spot and didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she saw Eustace's face, very pale and dirty, projecting from the blackness of the hole, and Eustace's right hand brandishing a sword which he made lunges at anyone who came near him. For of course Eustace had been having very different time from Jill during the last few minutes. He had Jill cried and seen her disappear into the unknown. Like the prince in Puddlegum, he thought that some enemies had caught her, and from down below he didn't see the pale bluish light was moonlight. He thought the hole would lead only into some other cave, lit by some ghostly phosphorescence and lived with goodness knows what evil creatures of the underworld. So he had been persuaded Puddlegum to give him a back and drawn his sword, and poked his head. He had really been doing a very brave thing. The others would have done it at first if they could, but the hole was too small for them to climb through. Eustace was a little bigger and a lot clumsier than Jill, so that when he looked out he bumped his head against the top of the hole and brought a small avalanche of snow down on his face. And so when he could see again he saw dozens of figures coming at him as hard as they could, and it is not surprising that he tried to ward them off. "Stop, Eustace, stop!" cried Jill. "They're all friends. Can't you see we've come up in Narnia? Everything's all right." Then Eustace did see, and he apologized to the dwarfs, and the dwarfs said not to mention it. And dozens of thick, hairy dwarfish hands helped him out just as they had helped out Jill a few minutes earlier. Then Jill scrambled up the bank and put her head at the dark opening and shouted the good news to the prisoners. As she returned away, she heard Puddlegum mutter, "Ah, poor Pole, it's been too much for her this last bit. Turned her head, I should wonder. She's beginning to see things." Jill rejoined Eustace as they shook one another by both hands and took great deep breaths of free midnight air, and a warm cloak was brought for Eustace and hot drinks for both. While they were sipping it, the dwarfs had already got all the snow and all the stuff on a large slip of hillside around the original hall, and the pickaxes and spade were now going merrily as the feet of fawns and dryads had been going in the dance 10 minutes before. Only 10 minutes! Yet it had already felt to Jill and Eustace as if all the dangers in the dark and heat and general smoothness of the earth had been only a dream. Out here in the cold with the moon and the huge stars overhead, Narnian stars are nearer than the stars in our world, and with kind merry faces all around them, one couldn't quite believe in Underland. Before they had finished their hot drinks, a dozen or so moles, newly awake and still very sleepy, and not well pleased, had arrived, but as soon as they understood what it was all about, they joined in with a will. Even the fawns made themselves useful by carting away the earth in little burrows, and the squirrels danced and leaped to and fro in great excitement. excitement. And though Joel never found exactly what they were doing, the bears and owls contented themselves with giving advice and kept on asking the children if they wouldn't like to come into the cave that was where Joel had seen the firelight and get warm and have supper. But the children couldn't bear without seeing their friends set free. None in our world can do a work of job that is sort as dwarfs and talking moles work in Narnia. But then, of course, moles and dwarfs didn't look on it as work. They liked digging. It was therefore not really doing what they had opened a great black chasm in the hillside, and out from the blackness into the moonlight, this would have been rather dreadful if one hadn't known who they were, came first the long, leggy, steeple-headed figure of the Marshwiggle, and then leading two great horses, Rilian the Prince himself. As Puddlegum appeared, shouts broke out on every side. "Why, it's a Wiggle! Why, it's old Puddlegum! Old Puddlegum from the eastern marshes! Whatever have you been doing, Puddlegum? There's been search parties out for you. The Lord Trumpkin has been putting up notices. There's a reward offered." But all this had died away, and in a moment into dead silence, as quickly as the noise dies away in a rowdy dormitory if the headmaster opens the door. For now they saw the prince. No one doubted for a moment who he was. There were plenty of beasts and dryads and dwarfs and fauns who remembered him from the days before his enchanting. There were some old ones who could just remember his father, King Caspian, and looked where he was a young man and saw the likeness. But I think they would have known him anyway. Pale though he was dressed for long imprisonment in the deep lands, dressed in black, dusty, dishevelled, and weary, there was something in his face and air which no one could mistake. That look is the face of all true kings of Narnia, who rule by the will of Aslan and sit a chair parallel on the throne of Peter the High King. Instantly every head was bared and every knee was bent, and a moment later such a cheering and shouting, such jumps and reels of joy, such handshakings and kissings and embracings of everybody by everybody else broke out that tears came to Joel's eyes. The quest had been worth all the pains it cost. "Please, said your highness," said the oldest of the dwarfs, "there's some attempt at supper in the cave yonder, prepared against the ending of the snow dance." "With a good will, father," said the prince, for never had any prince, knight, gentleman, or bear so good a stomach to his victuals as we four wanderers have tonight. The whole crowd began to move away through the trees towards the cave. Joel heard Puddlegum saying to those who pressed around him, "No, no, my story can wait. Nothing worth talking about has happened to me. I want to hear the news. Don't try breaking it to me gently, for I'd rather have it all at once. Has the king been shipwrecked? Any forest fires? No wars on the Calaman border? A few dragons, I shouldn't wonder." And all the creatures laughed aloud and said, "Isn't that just like a Marshwiggle?" The two children were nearly dropping with tiredness and hunger, and the warmth of the cave, and the very sight of it, with the firelight dancing on the walls, and dresses and cups and saucers and plates around the smooth stone floor down in a farmhouse kitchen, revived them a little. All the same day they went fast asleep while supper was being got ready, and while they slept Prince Rilian was talking over the whole adventure with the older and wiser beasts and dwarfs, and though they all saw what it meant, how a wicked witch, doubtless of the same kind as that with the white witch who had brought the great winter on Narnia long ago, had contrived the whole thing, first killing Rilian's mother and enchanting Rilian himself. And now she had dug right under Narnia and was going to break out and rule it through Rilian, and now he had never dreamed that the country of which she would make him king in name but really his slave, was his own country. And from the children's part of the story they saw how she was in league and friendship with the dangerous giants of Harfang. And the lesson of it all is, your highness, said the oldest dwarf, that those northern witches always mean the same thing, and in every age they have a different plan for getting it. Just a short disclaimer, everybody. I'm terribly sorry for the noise that just occurred.